This calm is not the reward for getting things right. It doesn't arrive with relief or a sense of completion. It shows up quietly, already settled, as if it were waiting for you to stop checking whether it belonged. You notice it in a moment that should have pulled you back into effort. Something happens. A thought forms. A familiar situation presents itself. And yet the usual internal movement doesn't follow. There is no tightening. No rush to interpret. No reflex to manage what this moment might mean about you. The calm doesn't announce itself as calm. At first, it feels more like a missing signal. Like the background hum that used to guide your reactions simply didn't turn on. You're still inside your life. Nothing external has dramatically changed. But something subtle is no longer reaching you in the same way. The scene doesn't resolve. It lingers, quiet, unfinished, inviting your attention without asking for explanation. You might expect this state to feel fragile, like something that could break if you look at it too closely. But it doesn't carry that tension. It doesn't require guarding. It doesn't ask you to behave correctly to keep it intact. It doesn't depend on maintaining the right mindset. You move through familiar routines and notice how little resistance is required. The old emotional entry points appear, tones of voice, delays, memories, signals you used to react to automatically. But they stop short. Not because you push them away. Because there is nothing inside you that opens on cue anymore. The calm isn't distance. It's precision. Things still arrive, but they don't travel all the way through you. They land at the edge and dissolve without effort. That absence of pull feels neutral at first. But neutral doesn't quite capture it. There's coherence here. Quiet, self-contained, uninterested in proving anything yet still fully present. And the scene continues, unchanged, unresolved, waiting. Before this, there was always a low-level readiness humming underneath everything. Even on good days. Even in moments you called peaceful. A subtle leaning forward. A constant sense that something might need your attention, correction, or performance. You stayed alert without realizing you were alert. Tracked reactions. Measured progress. Adjusted yourself in anticipation of what might come next. That posture once served a purpose. It gave you orientation. It gave you a sense of control and participation. But over time, the effort required to sustain it became heavier than the return. Now, that operating mode feels strangely irrelevant. Not wrong. Just unnecessary. The mind may still reach for it out of habit, expecting the familiar urgency to activate. But the signal doesn't amplify. It fades before it forms into momentum. Nothing dramatic happens here. Yet something fundamental has stopped responding. You begin to notice this shift in small, almost unremarkable moments. A message arrives, and you don't rehearse the perfect response. A plan changes, and your body doesn't tighten around the adjustment. A misunderstanding passes without triggering the need to correct the narrative. Care is still present. Thought is still present. But urgency has lost its authority. The gap between stimulus and reaction widens on its own. Not as a technique. Not as a discipline. It's simply there. Decisions carry less emotional weight. You choose without turning the choice into a statement about who you are. You pause without turning the pause into a problem. The calm isn't passive. It's efficient. It keeps your attention inside what's actually happening instead of donating it to imagined futures. And the scene continues, quietly gathering depth without explanation. There may be moments when a question tries to form. Soft, almost polite. What if this is temporary? What if you're missing something you used to chase? What if this stillness is actually avoidance? Before, those questions would have pulled you forward immediately. They would have demanded action. Now they appear and wait. And then they dissolve. Not because you answered them. Because they couldn't find traction. You begin to feel the difference in your body. Breath settles without instruction. Muscles unclench without reminder. The readiness that once lived in your nervous system no longer feels necessary. Tasks remain tasks. Movement remains movement. But action no longer signals threat. The calm is no longer conceptual. It's integrated. And the scene, still open, starts to soften. Time changes here. Not externally, but internally. Waiting no longer feels like falling behind. In-between moments don't demand resolution. Stillness doesn't carry guilt. The future loses its grip as a place you must reach in order to feel complete. You still plan. You still respond. But without the inner belief that something is late. Identity loosens. Not erased, simplified. You feel less compelled to define yourself, defend yourself, or narrate your experience in real time. Praise doesn't inflate. Criticism doesn't collapse. The old hooks depended on reaction, on identity maintenance, on tension to stay believable. Without that tension, they can't settle. The opening scene finally begins to resolve, not with a conclusion, but with recognition. What remains now doesn't need to be named. It looks ordinary. Days unfold without turning into a stage. Mistakes don't become verdicts. The calm persists because it isn't being maintained. It doesn't depend on conditions being ideal. It doesn't collapse when something goes wrong. You don't have to convince yourself to stay here. There's no effort involved in remaining. The old timeline still exists as a possibility, but not as a default. Its invitations feel distant, uninteresting. Life continues, not lighter, not heavier, just cleaner. Nothing needs to be done from here. No insight needs to be extracted. No conclusion needs to be drawn. The experience simply continues. And in that continuation, the absence of urgency speaks for itself.